Hey, it's movie retrospective time.
Yeah.
Here's another movie that Rob sent us this, right?
Yeah.
Our friend Rob Levinson, who sends us a lot of movies and lots of really kick-ass ones.
Sent us this one on Blu-ray.
He sent us this one on Blu-ray. I had seen it, but a long time ago. But I was very happy to have the opportunity to see it again. This is the vampire movie, 30 Days of Night.
Yeah, I saw it when it came out. I think it was on Netflix briefly.
It might have been, yeah.
Yeah, and at the time that it was on, I wasn't particularly interested. Other shit was going on, and I really didn't pay too much close of attention to it. But seeing it again, it's a good movie. It's kind of like up there with The Thing. It's like a different.
Yeah, it has kind of a similar vibe to it, just from like the isolation, like somebody that's people that are isolated, like in a really snowy.
Kind of like Carpenter's Thing and Thing 2011. It's kind of like that mixed with like Rage, Zombie, Apocalypse.
Yeah, like 28 days later. Yeah, and it's interesting because I do feel like, for those of you who don't know, this movie came out in 2007, although it was based on a very big selling. Comic book series by Steve Niles. And I can't believe, I remember when this comic book series first came out, and I was thinking to myself, holy crap, I can't believe that nobody ever thought, as far as I know, to do a vampire story set in the Arctic Circle, because some cities it's dark up there for a month, or sometimes several months at a time, and vampires could just run around willy-nilly 24 hours a day without having to worry about the sun coming up. And I was like, holy shit, why didn't anybody think of that before Steve Niles did? But he thought of it. Now, the interesting thing about this is that he had the idea for the comic, and apparently he went around to a bunch of different publishing houses in the late 90s or early 2000s, and no one was interested in the idea, which, okay. I guess maybe it's because people were used to vampires being more like Anne Ricey type of vampires. And
yeah, in that era, I think vampires were that was a bad idea in terms of the mainstream.
Yeah, it does seem
so were zombies.
Yeah, it does seem like, shit's been done since then. Yes, you had Near Dark. Later on you had From Dusk Till Dawn, which had the vampires more like monsters, going back to the original idea of a vampire rather than making them all suave and sexy and shit. But I feel like that wasn't really in the zeitgeist around the time that he was first pitching the idea to publishing companies. So since no publishing companies wanted to publish his comic, he's like, well, I'll turn it into a screenplay. And he started shopping that around, and no one gave a shit about that one either. But then there was this little publishing company called IDW, and they were kind of just started out, and they loved the idea of 30 Days of Night, and they said that they would publish it, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that it was the first comic book series that they published, and it was a humongous success. And then, predictably, all the movie companies came calling, and then there was a bidding war, and I think it ended up, Sam Raimi got involved, his production company, and I think they ended up paying, I think it was MGM and a couple other companies were give them $1 million, for the rights to make it. So then they started working on it. So, like I said, the artwork in it, Steve Niles didn't do the artwork. I can't remember, his name's Ben something, I think, the guy that did the artwork. But they wanted to not only use Steve Niles to write the screen treatment, although it went through some other writers later on too, but they wanted the look of the vampires that the artist had, put in the book, and they kind of wanted that for the screen. So the whole story behind it, it's actually, like you said, it's a fairly straightforward type of story. It's set in the small town Barrow, Alaska, and right at the beginning of the movie, it's the last day of sunlight for 30 days. So apparently some people that work up there, they leave, for this 30 days, and then they come back later on. So there's this one plane, it's the last day, everyone's trying to get on the plane to leave town and go back to wherever they're going. But some people do stay behind, 100-something people stay behind. Now, something that happens at the very beginning, there's a guy in this, he's never given a name, he's just called in the credits, I think he's just called the Stranger. And he comes into town, he's kind of the Harbinger, and he's sort of the Renfield character. He's not a vampire, but he's the guy that the vampires kind of like said, hey, go ahead and take out like all their communications and all this other kind of stuff in this town. So he goes to this town, he kills all the sled dogs, he steals everyone's phones and like burns them, and it's like he does all this shit so peeps, and he fucks up like the helicopters and stuff like that. So no one will be able to get out, and everyone that's left in this town will just be like walking snacks for this pack of vampires that come into the town.
Yeah.
And after that, it's pretty much like a siege type narrative where, you know, townspeople get picked, like a whole bunch of them get killed, like initially, because no one knows what the fuck is going on, as you wouldn't. And so then, like, it just, as it goes on, it is set over 30 days, so everything kind of goes really kind of quickly. They do kind of every now and then, it'll say, like, day 7 or day 18 or whatever. So it's basically the dwindling townsfolk that are trying to, like, you know, save people or trying to kill the vampires, trying to get supplies and hide out, because they do eventually figure out that these are vampires and that they don't have, like, the manpower to fight them. And the cool thing, too, is that not only do you have, like, these vampires, and there's a whole bunch of them, and you can't fight them because they're way stronger than you, and you can shoot them and it doesn't do anything, but then you also have the elements fucking you up because the vampires have cut off all the power, have cut off all communication, so it's, like, really, really cold. It's, like, it's really hard to get to where the food is and all this other kind of shit. So you not only have, it's, you know, so it's like The Thing in that way where, you know, you not only have, like, the elements working against you, but then you also have this essentially supernatural force that is kind of trying to fuck you over as well. So it's interesting that this is kind of like, in practice, yes, it's a vampire movie, but it is more like a zombie movie. It's, you know, it's a survival type movie. It's, you know, like I said, it's kind of like 28 Days Later, but set up in, you know, in Alaska and shit like that. When I was reading about this and I was watching some other reviews of this, I did not realize, and watching it, you will probably not realize either, that this was not filmed in Alaska, even though it looks like Barrow, Alaska. But I guess when they were filming it, this cost about $30 million to make. But they were like, well, we don't really want to shoot it in Alaska just because of, you know, the bad weather involved, and it was like, you know, too much trouble and it would be too expensive and everything. So they actually shot it in New Zealand. And I think they shot it in the spring or the summertime. So basically what they did was they built the entire town, and then they covered it all like in white blankets, and then they covered it all in, like, you know, sprayed it all with like fake snow. And then the rest of it, and I think they did this in The Thing as well, and then the rest of it, like outside of the town, like where the mountains and all that other shit was either done with CGI or done with like matte paintings and shit like that. And it looks incredible. I really would have had no idea had I not seen like some of the making of shots.
It looks good, but you know what? It doesn't look too cold to me. I mean, in The Thing, the John Carpenter's The Thing, you could tell it was cold.
Yeah. Because
the fucking breath.
Yeah.
Their breath, but you don't really see that in this.
You do, but it's digitally added.
Yeah, and it just doesn't look cold to me.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it wasn't.
I know what it looks like. I know what cold looks like, and it just didn't quite look cold to me. But it's an enjoyable movie, though. It's a good movie. It
is, and there's like some really good gore in it as well. Yeah. Now, I think initially when the movie was first submitted to the MPAA, because of the gore, I mean, you know, there's like a vampire gets cut in half by like some, what is that thing that
I don't know, it's like
vehicle.
It's a vehicle with a damn chainsaw.
It almost had like a gigantic chainsaw.
It's like something that you cut into the earth with to lay cables. That's
Okay, so that's what it was. I was like, I know it had to have some particular purpose, right, but I couldn't figure out what it was. So you get to see, like, a vampire gets cut in half by one of those. A little girl vampire gets beheaded. Yeah. A vampire gets thrown into one of those crusher machine things that, like, you know what I mean?
It'll crush any kind of metal or anything.
Yeah, so, like, it gets thrown into one of those, called. And one guy's, it has a name, but I can't remember what it is. And one guy, like, his arm gets torn off in it, and he gets fucking beheaded and all this other stuff. So this is a very, very gory movie. So when it first got submitted to the MPAA, so I've heard, they said, yeah, this shit's getting an NC-17 unless you cut out XYZ. And to their credit, the filmmakers were like, no, we're not cutting anything out of that. Right. Please give us an R rating. Right. And I guess they went back and forth with it, and they were just like, okay, fine, you can have an R, and you don't have to cut anything out, because they really, really didn't want to, and they didn't want to, like, you know, cut the balls out from under it. So the guy that directed it, who is actually the same guy that directed, this is actually the same director and writer that did Hard Candy, which I really recommend if you have not seen it. Totally different than this. It's more like a... Ellen Page was in it when she was much younger, and it's kind of like a reversal of like a pedophile type thing, where she's kind of like fucking with a guy who's a pedophile, you know what I mean? So it's really, really good. So it's more like a psychological horror, whereas this is pretty much a straight up monster movie, you know, where there's just a small group of people trapped in this fucking town and they can't get out, and they're just being like hunted down by fucking vampires who are trying to eat them.
Yeah.
Now, one thing you were talking about, and because in the graphic novel, the vampires do talk, and, you know, obviously they're speaking English because you wouldn't be able to read it otherwise, or English-speaking people wouldn't be able to read it. But when they were making the movie, they were thinking, well, they're like, the vampires are like a pack, and so they have to be able to communicate with one another, but they didn't really want them to talk. But they're like, well, they kind of have to talk a little bit. So the compromise that they made was that only the leader, who I think his name is Marlowe, although I'm not sure if they ever mentioned that in the story, but they basically invented an entire language. Like, they got a fucking linguistic professor from like the University of Auckland in New Zealand to like help them, and they were kind of trying to model it after like some you know, kind of like old like African like tribal languages, where it was like, you know, click languages and stuff. So they were try to model it after that, but not anything that anyone would recognize. And as far as I know, when we were just watching it before we recorded this, I think he's the only one that talks, right? Now his
I didn't
his
agree
girlfriend Iris, I think she talks too, maybe, but he's mainly the one that talks. The rest of them just kind of like scream and make these high pitched sounds like they're calling one another, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I didn't agree with the direction that they went with all that.
You thought they shouldn't have talked at all?
No, I think they should have talked. I think all of them should have talked. But when they did talk, they should have said something that was kind of... Here's the thing, that the way it is. They don't say much, and it's only one guy who says something.
Yeah, he mostly talks.
And what he says is very vapid and superficial. All right? You would think that if they had been around for centuries, they would have a pretty complicated culture and language system. I think that would have made them a little more exciting or a little more interesting. And then you would think that they would kind of have individual personalities. But they don't really in the movie. They're animalistic.
Yeah, I just kind of saw them as like a pack of wolves.
Yeah, and the leader can speak, but
he doesn't say that much.
Doesn't say that much, and it's nothing really important. You know what I mean? And it makes you wonder, well, how have they survived for this length of time being that simplistic? In order to survive against a technological society, you have to be sophisticated. You have to know about... Well, evidently they knew about electronic communications.
Yeah.
But you'd think they would also, like, have phones and be on the web. And, you know what I mean? And pulling out information and stuff. But they don't, you know, because that's how you stay abreast of human progress. You know what I mean? And be able to compete against humans. You got to be able to play in that same game.
I wonder, though...
And they weren't really. They were animalistic, and one of them could speak, and they were kind of intelligent, but not really, you know, based on what they said. You know, just... So, I know it's just a movie, and, you know, it's theater. But I was just thinking to myself, I was like, I don't think these guys would really be able to make it against a sophisticated society for long. Because, okay, they burned the town down. Well, eventually forensic guys are going to come in there and try to piece together what happened. And they would eventually figure out that there's a band of people that aren't human running around. You know, they'd be getting blood samples and stuff, and hair and tissue samples. Because look at how many dead ones they left behind.
Yeah.
So I just don't think that I don't think as it's shown, I don't think they would have been hunted down and killed eventually.
Now, see, I'm not sure how much of that they went to, because, like I said, I believe the original comic book miniseries that the movie was based on, I think, was 3 installments, and I think that Steve Niles went on to write like a whole bunch more, where he like expanded the whole world and everything. And I believe that they made like a made for. I don't know if it was made for web or if it was made for TV or something like that. They made a prequel, which was called Blood Trails. And there's also a sequel to this called 30 Days of Night, Dark Days. And I've heard it wasn't that great, but I haven't seen it. It was basically just made like to go straight to video or straight to VOD. So there is like a much larger lore around these vampires and around like how they operate and stuff like that. I just haven't read like all the supplementary material.
You see, vampires would have to have certain survival strategies. If they're few in number, then their survival strategy has to be like something you'd see out of an Anne Rice book, where they blend in and they spend most of the time hiding. You know, but they know each other.
Yeah.
But they don't ever really peek their heads up. Now, if there's a bunch of them, then they have to be something kind of like out of Blade, where they're their own civilization, a parallel civilization that has technology and knowledge, and they have money, and they have the ability to corrupt human politicians, and you know what I mean, have pull with human governments and shit. You know what I mean? They'd have to be like that, one of the two. This is just kind of more like a zombie plague or a wolf pack. And
that's kind of how I saw it, because I just saw it as more like a straight up monster movie.
Which that would work, but I just don't think that could survive for centuries, not in the modern world.
Well, like I said, unless they stayed in hiding, and I don't think they go into this in the movie unless I missed it, and it might go into this in the graphic novel. Maybe they don't have to feed that often, so maybe they can like kind of hide, and then every now and then they come out and have this big like blood orgy feast.
Yeah, but that's not hiding, because then they jump out, have a blood orgy feast, and then all of a sudden they're on the radar. The way Lestat hid was seducing individual people and drinking them, and then the bodies are never found.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. That happens a lot, serial killer type stuff, you know. These guys are leaving whole wasted towns behind. Man, questions would be asked. They'd figure that out eventually.
Yeah, well, like I said, maybe this is like a new... because he did say, like Marlowe does say at the beginning, it's like, why didn't we do this a long time ago? So maybe they had been doing that, and maybe they weren't getting... Because I think, from what I've read about the comic book series, that this is like the last... You know, this is like all of them that are left.
Yeah, that's another thing about...
So maybe they had been, like, had some other kind of way of doing shit, and it wasn't working out because they were all getting, like...
That's another thing. Another problem I had with this movie is that I really couldn't get a good idea of how many vampires there were and how many townspeople there were. It was kind of vague.
Well, at the beginning, when everybody left the town that leaves for those 30 days... initially, the little population thing said 500 and something, but then the sheriff deputy like goes out there and changed the sign to like 142 or something like that. So most of the people leave. So there was like, but then in the first like, you know, when the vampires first got there and nobody really knew what was going on, there was like kind of this big. They were picking off a few like around the edges, and then there was like a big melee and a whole bunch of them got killed because when they showed like over the top, you know, they did these drone shots,
I guess so.
Like over the town where there was just like blood everywhere and there was like body parts
I was having
everywhere.
a hard time figuring out who was who. It was just, you know, people running around. It didn't really seem to be like 100 of them. It looked more like about 20.
Well, yeah, but that's because in the first part of the movie, like a whole bunch of them were taken out. And you have to think too that they're compressing a whole month into, you know, like a 2-hour movie.
That was another thing I wanted to mention, is that, they talked about the time passing, you know what I mean? Like you said, you know, 15 days, 20, but you really didn't get an accurate sense that time had passed.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
did. That was kind of one criticism that I could
let,
because I really
like grown.
Well, no, the deputies did.
Yeah,
when they found him, like his hair was long and
30
like
days
that.
Without power in a town like that, you know.
Well, they had generators, and that big building where they were going at the end, where the thing that crunched up everything was. that had power still, because I guess that was like on a different grid, or if it was outside of the town somewhat, and I guess the vampires didn't get to that, or their Renfield guy didn't get to that. So that looked like it still had power, or at least had generators, because when they went in there, like all the lights were still on, and that's why they kept trying to get there, because that's still where the power was. But yeah, so that is one, slight criticism that I could give toward, is that yeah, you didn't get an idea that this was, because they were holed up in an attic, and then suddenly it's like 7 days later, and they're still kind of up there.
Yeah.
So I can see why they did it. I said, it's 3 books worth of stuff that they're compressing into one short movie.
If you cut out the little scenes that came out and told you how many days were left, you'd cut all that out. And then I watched the movie, and you told me, well, they were only there for 3 days. I said, oh yeah, about 3 days.
Yeah.
Because it's just I didn't have the sense that time had passed, really.
Yeah.
Other than just they told me time had passed, but it didn't really look like it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
houses hadn't fallen over, things hadn't been, icicles weren't taking up the room, and you know what I mean? Because if a house freezes and sits there freezing in sub-zero temperature, a lot can go wrong if there's no power. In 30 days.
Yeah.
And elements take over.
Yeah, and like I said, some people did have generators, and so they were kind of trying to move from place to place, like where the generators were still working, where the electricity was still working, and stuff like that. And then at some point they had to go, like during the blizzard, they had to go to the store and get food and shit.
Here's another thing: the vampires were powerful; they were unstoppable, and they're moving to these places, and they got the power running. What, the vampires didn't know where they were? I didn't really buy that. They would know right where they were. You know what I mean? It'd be impossible to hide from them.
Yeah.
And the woman and the little girl were hiding underneath that damn car in the snow, and they didn't seem cold. Man,
they weren't there for very long.
Yeah, but I laid down in the snow in the army. It doesn't take long. 5 minutes later, you're, especially with what they're wearing. You know what I mean? You can die quickly.
Well, that's why at the end, and if you haven't seen it, spoiler alert. But that's why at the end, that's why he decided that he had to inject himself with vampire blood and turn himself into a vampire to fight them, because she was going to die out there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why he made that decision really quickly, to just go out there and fight them so they could get out. Because by that point, the vampires had started burning the town down. Yeah. And so he's like, well, she's going to either freeze to death or burn to death, so I have to fucking do something.
Even though I think it had problems, it was still a good movie.
It's actually one of the better vampire movies.
It's still a good movie. It's enjoyable. The tone of the movie is about right for a movie kind of like this. The tone, in some ways, is just a little bit more serious than maybe like Blade.
Yeah, I think Blade had more of a comedic type of tone.
Well, sometimes it did.
Yeah, whereas this one was, like you said, a lot more serious, more like a serious monster movie, kind of, Kind of
like that. What's that one with the damn rage zombies?
28 Days Later.
Yeah, that was about like that.
That's what I was thinking. And some, it is kind of similar too, because in this one, I don't think you need to get bit by a vampire. You can just get some of their blood on you, or like in your mouth or something like that, like in your bloodstream. Bless you, Pookie.
Yeah.
She's over there sneezing, probably because it's dusty. And you'll turn, but they do have a thing where I think if you get bit, you turn like really quickly, but then if you just get blood in your mouth or something like that, like it takes a while. You know what I mean? And you'll still like kind of have some of your faculties, because that does happen a few times. Like a few people that don't get bit, but it takes them a while to like turn into a vampire and all this other kind of stuff. And there's also the thing too, another thing that reminded me of The Thing was that they were concerned that if the whole town burned down and everyone in it died, then the vampires would just like move on to the next town, or move on to another town and kill everybody there, and no one would know what was going on, because there wouldn't be any survivors or anything. Similar to The Thing, where they were trying to stop the dog from going to the next camp, and so the alien shit wouldn't spread.
I guess they were trying to burn the town down to hide the evidence that they were there.
Well, yeah, he said that.
But that never really works out in reality.
That's what he said. But like I said, this is like a tiny town in the middle of fucking nowhere. Yeah. So, and as I said, I think I thought the implication was that these are the last of their kind. And so they're basically just kind of hanging on by a thread. They're just trying to survive. And maybe they've been doing other shit and it hasn't been working. So one of them thought, hey, let's go to this little town where it's, dark for 30 days and we can just run around and run amok and kill everybody. Because Marlowe, the leader, was like giving them instructions as though this was a new thing that they were doing. You know what I mean? So I don't think they've been doing this the whole time.
Right. Well, it was a mistake, if you ask me.
Yeah.
In reality, if you keep doing that, humans will catch up with you.
Well, yeah. And like I said, maybe there was some...
So I don't think these guys were that smart.
Some implication. Well, yeah, I don't think they were.
Yeah.
They were pretty much just like animals
Kinda
like a wolf
right.
pack. And, they could talk and they wore human clothes and
stuff. Or
that
one
but,
did.
Yeah, but the other ones just seemed like animals. They didn't talk. They just kind of screamed and like ran and like ate people.
Yeah.
So...
They were kind of more like werewolves in a certain way. They didn't have a bat. They weren't bat-like. They were more wolf-like.
Yeah, and they had I really, really like the they did like those black eyes, and then they did
twist their eyes up like
that. They did that with CG, even though a lot of the effects in this were actually practical effects that they just kind of enhanced with CG. But I really, really liked the teeth that they did that kind of look like shark teeth, like they all look like fangs, and they had like these big gross mouths and everything.
They were all yellow and stuff.
Yeah, which they would be because vampires wouldn't brush their teeth, I would imagine.
I guess. Lestat brushed his teeth.
Yeah, but
he just was always,
how did you know?
He was just always perfect. That pretty motherfucker was always perfect. He didn't even go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Maybe. Well, did she get into that in the book?
Yeah.
I thought she did.
Yeah. Soon as you got turned,
like your butthole closed up, right?
No, you vomited and shat out everything that was in you, and you never
had to do it again.
Never happened again.
Sounds pretty good, I think.
And because you weren't carrying on any kind of metabolism.
Yeah, that's what I thought she had gotten into. It's been a while since I've read the books, but
you were basically possessed by that damn poltergeist. That was
remember that Lasher, right?
I think is what it was.
Yeah.
And you were possessed by that. A part of that poltergeist energy was in you, and you just kind of it was fueled by, I guess the midichlorians. The midichlorians in your blood. There was something about blood where
vampire magic.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, is less plausible than...
So they didn't breathe, they didn't eat, or they didn't drink anything. They were other than blood.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot all about that. Because that's the thing. It's you can say stuff about, particularly a movie that's about a creature that doesn't exist, and you can sit there and pick holes in it and stuff like that. But it's like, well, at the end of the day, the shit doesn't exist, and there's like only so much. You got to explain this shit somehow.
Anne Rice, I think, came up with a good idea of, that basically it was an animated... It was like an animated preserved corpse, kind of like a statue moving around. And it was just kind of possessed by this...
And animated by a demon, kind of.
Yeah, it was animated by partially a poltergeist, a demonic poltergeist, and the person who had once inhabited that body or that mind,
which does seem to be
infused with both of them.
It does seem to be one of the best ways to do that because then you have the person as the person. It still looks like them, but you still have like a magical element that explains a lot of shit.
They didn't eat. They didn't go to the bathroom. They didn't breathe. They didn't sweat. They didn't have any kind of smell or odor. That way they could just lay in the tomb for centuries and get up and just like they were clean. You know what I'm talking about? Their hair and everything. And if they cut their hair off when they woke up,
it would be back. I do remember that because that was even in the movie. Like, you know what I mean? Where they cut off her hair she cut off her hair. And
you had to make sure you had your hair cut right before you became a vampire because that's the one you were going to keep. You were going to keep that hair forever.
Yeah.
What if you cut it? And
what if you had a mullet when you got turned into a vampire?
If you cut your hair every day, you know what I mean, to have a different style, you had to burn that hair.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it would end up piling up.
Yeah.
Because you'd grow it right back. So they burned you'd have to get a haircut every day.
Yeah.
When you woke up. But they were good enough to give themselves a haircut.
Yeah.
Because they had all that skill. And they could see somebody play a violin and instantly be able to just pick it up and play it like a master. So.
See, some of the shit would be a pain in the ass, but I still think it would be kind of rad to be that kind of vampire.
No real sense of passage of time, from my understanding, from what she said either. Just like every day was the same.
It's good that she kind of like got into it because I think a lot of vampire stories don't really go into the whole like going to the bathroom issue and shit like that. Because I know a lot of zombie shit doesn't. Because zombies, they're dead and they're reanimated corpses, but they're walking around, they're eating people. So presumably, what is like it just sitting in their stomach, or they got
I guess it's sitting in there.
They got to poop it out, or no? Do zombies poop? Nobody talks about that.
I don't think they really digest, but maybe they do. Yeah, I guess
it's got to go somewhere. Otherwise,
hungry.
they would just explode after a while because it would all just like build up in there.
Yeah.
They'd all be walking around with like these big.
So I guess they do kind of digest a little bit.
So you'd think like on The Walking Dead, they'd be going around talking, stepping in like piles of zombie poop all the time.
Yeah. But no,
you got to think about stuff
I think
like
I think Anne Rice's vampires would be something that would actually survive.
Yeah.
And exist and could explain what they did in the movies.
Yeah.
I think she had it figured out.
Yeah.
That's what it would
she
be.
did like a lot of
research. Right.
You know what I mean? And
how could something like that exist and what would it be like and why?
Yeah, because you at least need something that's like believable, so people will be like, yeah, that sounds like
Yeah, and they had vampire internet. It was like a spiritual radio, remember? They could hear
they
what
could
other
hear
ones they were getting texts.
Yeah, it was like the Force.
Yeah.
Basically.
Like a text messages and
like
shit.
with Jedis and stuff.
Yeah, right.
So when you have something like that, I mean, that's essentially magic, but it helps you explain
It was psychic
things.
abilities.
Yeah, so people will be like, all right, that's
part of them was quantum. I guess.
Yeah.
Be a good way to explain it.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. Like I said, the vampires in this almost seem more like you said, almost more like werewolves or but I like that, because as much as I like the romantic vampire, I like that he came out and went back to like the more Nosferatu, like the nasty looking, yucky, animalistic vampires, because it seemed like so many of them had gone off in the other direction. Like you had all that Twilight bullshit and that kind of stuff, where they were just like a pretty creep that
Twilight kind of fucked it up.
It really did, didn't it? It just kind of ruined all that.
It'd have been so much better.
Ruined everything.
It would have been so much better had Queen of the Damned, that movie, not happened. Because I think that wrecked the Anne Rice.
It did, and that's a shame.
Universe.
Because that would have been, because Interview with the Vampire, the movie, was so good.
It was good, yeah.
And then it's like, I don't understand why they just made Queen of the Damned and then they smushed that together with Lestat when they could have made a trilogy.
Yeah.
I don't know why they don't. Maybe they still will.
It was bang for the buck. They were trying to get everything into one movie, I guess. And then they were trying to get the goth crowd, and they were trying to do too much shit at once.
Yeah.
In one movie. They should have slowed down. That was in a time when trilogies weren't a thing.
Yeah, it's not like, I mean, nowadays they want to do everything like expanded universe.
What they should do is they ought to make a damn Netflix series with Anne Rice vampire.
They really should.
That would
because there's
change
so many.
Game. Imagine if you did Interview with the Vampire the way it was in the book.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Get on it, Netflix.
Yeah, that would be really good.
Or Shudder.
And if you had like good actors doing that.
Yeah.
And they, I thought Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise were really good in that movie.
They actually were, and I'm not a huge fan of Tom Cruise, as most people know.
Tom Cruise fucking did Lestat, man.
He was really good in that.
That was basically Lestat. He was a little older than Lestat.
Lestat was what, 25?
No, I think he was
21?
supposed to be about 16, 17 when he turned 20.
See, I thought he was early 20s.
Maybe. I was thinking that they were late teens.
Yeah.
16, 17, 18, around that when they were turned.
So they were at maximum prettiness.
Maximum pretty. Because they were choosing each other. They were choosing each other who would become a vampire based on what they looked like.
There.
Yeah. They didn't want any little kids or fucked up people and no old people.
Well, yeah. How much would that suck, getting turned into a vampire as like a crotchety?
Well, there was one of them named Magnus that turned himself into a vampire.
Yeah,
he was a sorcerer. No, he was an alchemist.
Yeah.
He dug up a vampire and drank the damn blood. He didn't have any teeth. He just had vampire teeth and gums.
Yeah. He was like, God, he's the one that turned
Lestat, yeah.
Because he's like, God damn it, I should have done this like 50 years ago.
He just kind of had to live as a damn wraith up in a tower. Remember that? Because he didn't have no charisma.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was back in the medieval period that he turned himself.
So everybody was gross.
They were all gross back then, right? He was an old school vampire. Like basically, what they described is they described Nosferatu.
Yeah,
is kind of what he looked like.
Yeah, which and the movie version of Nosferatu. If you've never read the book Dracula, that's much closer. Right. Dracula in the book was an old man.
Yeah,
like with a mustache and shit like that. No, they hardly ever give him a mustache in the movies.
Yeah, but like, and I believe his name was, Magnus was, I think was his name. Even though in the movie Queen of the Damned, they show him as like a good-looking guy.
Of course.
And in the books, Magnus was dead. He killed himself right after he made Lestat.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was like right at the beginning, right? Yeah, when Lestat was telling about his
He told
history.
Lestat the rules and everything. He says, only make pretty vampires, only do this, do that, and then this is all you need to know. And then he killed himself.
Vampire rules.
Said,
here.
Remember that? He gave him the rules. He says, you don't need to know it. This is all you need to know. And then
He's
he jumped
like, I'm out, bitches.
Yeah, I'm out of here. And then jumped in the fire. Remember they jumped in that damn fire?
I remember.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a long time since I read
scene.
them, but I do remember that. And I don't,
Yeah.
you know what? I don't think I ever sat through Queen of the Damned in its entirety.
The movie?
I think I started, I've read all her books.
The best thing about that movie is it had an awesome soundtrack. It had a good soundtrack, but
Yeah,
other than
it
that, the movie was a miss.
I think I remember like starting to watch it and being like, I don't think this is for me.
They tried to stuff all those books into one movie.
Those are very long books, those two books. Come on.
And you just can't capture the romance of those books.
And Vampire Lestat was like, that's probably my favorite of the original trilogy. And I can't believe that didn't get its own movie. That is so fucking lame.
It was good.
So Netflix needs to get on that, especially, now that we're all stuck in and we need shit to watch.
Right.
So somebody make like all the Vampire Chronicles.
Then they're out there making the Vampire Chronicles and fucking biosuits.
Yeah, for real. All right. So anyway, thank you again, Rob, for sending us 30 Days of Night.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Very much appreciated.
It's
Definitely one of the most decent, vampire as a monster type movies. So, and the vampires in it are actually like kind of scary. They're not like all like...
It's not a perfect movie. I mean, there are very few perfect movies in existence. You know what I mean? Some people say there are no perfect movies. That's bullshit. Fucking Back to the Future was a perfect movie.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Raiders of the Lost Ark is a perfect movie.
Also a perfect movie.
Yeah.
Jaws.
Yeah.
I mean, I could think of some.
Alien 1 and 2.
That I wouldn't change anything.
Alien 1.
Yeah.
And Aliens.
Yeah.
Terminator 1. Damn near perfect.
Yeah.
For a low budget movie. There's Predator 1.
Yeah.
Is a perfect movie.
Yeah.
Some people go, well, no, I told you shut the fuck up. That's a perfect damn movie. Some things, it's like anything else, it's art appreciation, you know what I mean? It's subjective, but from my point of view, those are perfect movies.
Yeah, and
And the top of the perfect movie shit pile is Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Beat for beat, that movie's perfect.
Yeah, like I said, in the sense that you wouldn't change anything about it. That most people would not change anything about it.
And I'd have to say part 2 is damn near perfect.
And it's a movie you can watch over and over again, and it's still delightful.
And then part 3 is still damn good. A lot of people didn't like it. I didn't like it as much when I was younger. Now that I'm older, Back to the Future Part 3 makes a lot more sense.
Because it's very Western, and I'm not really into Westerns, but...
Well, it had to wrap up Doc Brown's story that he was a man and he needed a woman too. It was that was the whole thing. It was about being an older guy.
Yeah, I appreciated
Marty
it
had been
more.
Solved. So that trilogy right there is the best trilogy in film.
I think it might be, yeah. Because it does seem like all 3 of the movies are good.
Yeah.
And you don't usually get that. It's like usually 1 or 2 of them are brilliant and then one's kind of blows.
And the fucking score to all of them, it's just right on. Every beat for beat. All through that entire trilogy. There's no, it's not marred by anything.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing in it that
throws you out of it. There's nothing in it there's nothing
you're like,
that makes the tone
they
fucked
should have done this, that,
right.
Other thing.
No. I can't imagine those movies done in any other way.
No, I can't.
And there's some kind of fucking weird rumor that they're going to remake Back to the Future. And my hair's standing up going, don't you dare fucking touch Back to the Future.
Well, I feel like they're going to get around to remaking everything.
That's a bad idea.
Why don't, so the people that are talking about remaking Back to the Future, why don't you make the Vampire Chronicles instead?
So better, yeah.
Because there you go. There's only the first movie was good, then you made Queen of the Damned and you fucked it up. You didn't even make Vampire Lestat. Come on. Do that instead. Do that trilogy. Because we haven't really seen that trilogy. You gotta have a
master make the Vampire trilogy.
Well, yeah.
Including Interview with the Vampire King.
Like I said, do like some Haunting of Hill House shit. Yeah. Like Netflix needs to fund that shit.
I would say
Mike Flanagan could direct it.
That's not something you give to Hollywood. That's something you give to Netflix nowadays.
That's what I'm saying. Get a really good horror director to get in there on that shit. I'd watch it. So, vampires.
Yeah.
All right. So, again, thanks, Rob, for sending us the movie. And hope you guys enjoyed our take on 30 Days of Night.